Welcome back to Wall Tactics. We're here to talk about the rise of the Green Tide, or in this case, the rise of the Orks as a whole. So we're going to go over 4 undefeated Ork lists today, 2 of those being Bully Boys, 1 Green Tide, and 1 War Horde. So as always, let's start with the stats and the facts. So for this meta watch, we have the Bully Boys sitting at a 58% win rate, Green Tide at a 58, War Horde 56, Cult of Speed is 45, the Hunt is 40, and Dreadmob is sitting down at 37. But this is what's interesting is Cult of Speed, barely any players. The Big Hunt is only 5 players. But Dreadmob has more players than War Horde, and they're sitting with 14. So there was a real effort to get out there, but they mostly just took, hard losses. So that's a bit of a different outcome, but hey, they're still being explored as it's a very complicated version of playing Orks. So we have the Bully Boys leading the way with 4 tournament wins, War Horde winning 1 of those, and so the Green Tide. So we're going to be covering some of those, as you can see. What the actual Meta Monday said about Orcs as a whole is Orcs is the best with the 54% overall weekend and a 6 event wins, with 4 of those being Bully Boys, like I said earlier. So they said it's pretty healthy for the most part. A lot of people feel like they're oppressive. I think Mega Knobs, of course, can go up, but I don't think Orcs are really that bad. So let's take a look at some of the best performing lists. So we're going to start off with Noah. So with Noah, he actually ran a Green Tide list. And Noah was actually in our Discord, so he gave me a couple pointers of points of conversation reference of his game. So we can actually take a look at it here together, because we always think win path is very important. So let's take a look at his list, which is the Green Tide. He calls us Surfs Up, 2 Pain Boys, 2 War Bosses, with 1 with Ferocious Show Off, a Mega Boss and War Boss and Mega Armor with Rucker's Warcaller, and then a Weird Boy with Bloodthirsty Belligerent. So normally I would only pay for 1 enhancement, but it's interesting that he decided to put all 3. I don't think they're bad at all. They're actually pretty cheap. So he took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 20-man units of boys, and then a 10-man unit of boys. I found myself playing with about the same amount of boys as well. The 120 max just feels like you don't really have a lot of other stuff to do actions with, and it takes up even more time. You kind of want to free up points for something that can kill, or in this case, transport a battle wagon. So he has 1 truck, 1 battle wagon, 1 Grot unit, and he also found the points to fit in the commandos. That's another reason why you wouldn't want to bring the full max unit of boys, because you're trying to free up some points for stuff like this. He has good infiltrating tech to start with. Mega Knobs, because everybody loves Mega Knobs, and only 1 Stormboy unit. I found that pretty interesting, as most people want at least 2. He's really optimizing his scoring potential with the 10-man unit, the truck, and the commandos if he can, but it's matchup dependent, as we've seen when he actually went into his game. So he does have his own, I think, network that he's on. So we'll show that in the comments after the stream. So we'll go over his path, his his win path, as that's always very important. And I'll try to keep in mind some of the notes he gave me, because he did have Dark Angels. He said it was nothing too interesting with the Dark Angels list that he felt like he wanted the reference. So he said it's Azrael, Captain and Terminator armor, Librarian Terminator armor with Deathwing Assault. We have Deathwing Knights, Deathwing Terminator Squad, Infiltrators, Inner Circles Companions, Redeemer, Dreadnought, Scout. So the point why he said there's nothing really to write home about is because this list is really durable, but it's not going to out OC you or kill you fast enough to stop you from scoring and maxing out primary and denying their primary. So this is one of those matchups that they might not die, but they're not killing you fast enough to really get through everything. And the little bit of power claws that you do get through, the damage you do get through from killing a couple of them, all the ones they roll because you're just throwing buckets of dice at them, as they're losing killing potential and such, you're still just winning in the game and limiting their score very much. So he actually didn't have much thing to say about that. Most of us know that that's not the most, competitive version of Dark Angels, but it is nice to see how that would actually look on paper, because a lot of Space Marine players would think, well, if I bring a bunch of Terminators, I just won't die. And yeah, maybe you won't, but we won't either, not before we actually take over the whole table. So that was Noah ended up flexing on that Space Marine Dark Angels list. Now, as to his Necrons list, he said it was a Destroyer cult. He was worried about the flayed ones. but he was able to take a 20-man unit of Boyz on the top of the objective, and Commando Squad was to bait his Scorpex turn 1, and then he called a wall and he picked up all those units. So pretty much he played more of the counter kind of offensive, but used his commandos as bait in this Necron matchup. So he has a Scorpec Lord, another Scorpec Lord, the Silent King, Canoptic Scarab Swarms, 2 of them, 2 Death Marks, 2 Dooms Arcs, 2 units of Flayed Ones, which also have infiltration, I believe. Heavy Destroyer, Heavy Destroyer, Heavy Destroyer, and then 2 units of the Scorpec Destroyers. Those guys do have the devastating wound potential, so they can actually do some damage on paper. That's most, and they get a good amount of attacks, good strength, so they're wounding on 3s and they're getting rerolls. So you definitely don't want to just give up your units to a unit like this. You could just fail to, survive enough, and they do pick up one of your units and start really bothering you and killing you too quickly. That's the thing with Green Tide, is he didn't want to give up any of his units turn 1. What he did was just put up 20-man unit to kind of bait stuff out and play the mission, his commandos to pull out the Scorpex, and then he counterpunched with everything else on turn 2 against this kind of list, which in my opinion was very smart, because you don't really want to get stuck in a toe-to-toe, let them get the initiative on you with these Scorpec Lords. And the Silent King himself, he I guess kind of punches a little, does some shots, but he's really relying on you rolling poorly to get through that. So great job with taking over the Necrons by that. Then we have his round 3 matchup, he said, was a combined arm Space Wolves player, but he just didn't have the tools. So let's take a look at these tools that he might have been lacking. So he had Champions of Rough Detachment, a Captain, a Chaplain in Terminator Armor, a Cyber Wolf, Librarian in Terminator Armor, Lieutenant, Wolfpack, Leader with the Jump Pack. So right off the bat, without even looking at the rest of this, I can see why you're saying he doesn't have enough tools. He has so many characters that are taking these points that aren't just straight up Thunderwolf Cav, which means these aren't the tools as we see in the first matchup that are going to help you in this, like the Terminator Chaplain and the Librarian and Terminator Armor. So we can see where this is headed, right? He has Blood Claws, Gray Hunters. So these are like cheap battle line units that in theory you could punch with the Sons of Rust. A Razorback with twin las cannons, Land Raider, and this one actually has a god las cannon, so that obviously doesn't have much to kill besides the battle wagon. So then we have a Long Fang unit with more las cannons, Predator Annihilator with twin las cannon, a Scout, Sky Claws, Terminators, Wolfendread. So yeah, he just didn't have the tools to deal with something like a Green Tide. He was a combined force. This guy's looking at other armies saying, I'm going to pop your Land Raiders. I'm going to get out. I'm going to punch you. I have little skirmishing units to go to you with Space Marines. I have reliable infantry to shoot. So this list was thought out. It's just against something like a Green Tide or any kind of hard skew this list would suffer against. And that's what he ran into with Noah. So good job, Noah, by taking that over. So in his 4th matchup, he said he was a familiar GT player he was used to, was Hypercrypt. And he said it was Sights of Power, Hammer, and Anvil. So let's take a look at this list real quick. He said Seller of the Catan, Hypercrypt Legion. So we have Catan Shard, Nightbringer, Catan Shard, Void Dragon, Hexmark, Destroyer, Technomancer. Wraiths, Doomsday Arcs, Locust Destroyer, just individuals, just to go around play mission. And then Tomb Blades, which actually could have good volume, but I think they had these other weapons I'm not familiar with. So right here, he was saying, well, in this game, he said he took Assassinate so he could try to kill his characters, but in no one response, consolidated all his characters and kept all their squads back or in the vehicle. So they limited his scoring. He manipulated the characters, which is exactly how you should play that if you're going into someone who's trying to take Assassinated to you. And he said he just screened out wide for the Nightbringer, and he didn't cross the mid table either, but neither did he. He called a turn 4 WAAAGH, swarm the board to get primary. He killed 2 characters all game, and he got to deploy, but kept him at about 20-ish primary. So he did have to give up some primary because he's kind of just ignoring the Catans and such. But with that being said, So this was a 120-person event, and then there were some drops he said in there. But overall, that's a grand tournament, so it was very legit. He won his golden ticket to the GW championships off this. Of course, he had to be an excellent player to be able to run Green Tide within the time limit. So if you want to know more, he has his channel. We'll post it in the comments, and he's a part of our Discord, so you can run up in there and talk to that git because he's really nice and comforting to speak to about Green Tide. So here we go. War for Noah and the Bedlam. Oh shoot, that was an alarm. Sorry. So from there, we're gonna move into Chris Taylor. Chris Taylor was at another GT. This one was a smaller one with 33 players. But in this case, Chris Taylor was running the Bully Boys, but he had a few tech pieces that I actually really wanted to look at that most people are not really using. So, hola de Puerto Rico, mi gente. All right, so we have 20. We have the Bully Boys list, but in this Bully Boys list, he has some fun points here. So he has a Zagra Wartsnaga. Yes, Zagra in the Bully Boys list, boys. It's legit. We're here. We have 2 war bosses, 3 war bosses in mega armors. One's the big gob, so the dude that yells at you makes the battle shock test. I think that's just fantastic to think about in your head. And then he has the Telepaw, because deep striking mega armored boys is awesome. Then another war boss mega armor, like I said, that has nothing. 2 units of flash skits. Hey, flash skits making their comeback, right? They're excellent for skirmishing. They're tough like a little knob. They get 4 attacks base, strength 5. They feel really good, and just pop that lethally when they come out. You're the fact that they have sustain already, and then you have lethal at least once per game means you have a good chance of actually getting a trade for those cheap 80 points. He has the full 20-man unit of Gretchen for Zod, so he paid the Zod tax. He has another unit of Gretchen, but he also stuck in the Commandos, boys. Yes, he did. This very much looks like the very notorious I strike you first with the proper wall, and then I hit you with the bully boy wall. That's what this is really looking like. So he has 2 war bosses of mega armor. It's 5. I'm sorry, 2 5-man units of mega knobs with power claws and custom shooters, and then he has a 6-man unit of mega knobs, which is probably the teleporter lad. 4 of those guys have twin kills alls. Then he has 2 5-man units of knobs with the war boss, of course, 2 storm boy units, and then 4 trucks. I was gonna say 5. Sorry, 4 trucks here on this list for the ultimate transports because trucks are completely vital for an orc list like this for Bully Boys from Mega Knobs being so slow. So I love that this is very much up to he brings initial WA with Zod and the Commandos possibly, and then he runs up in there with the actual real WA. What's interesting is he's probably running some what I like to call SWAT teams here, as the flash gets can go with the 5-man units of knobs and the war boss into that truck, and then that becomes a well-rounded kind of skirmish thing, right? If it's a volume amount of units, you can put those flash kits in there. If it's something that has power armor, just the knobs can get out. If you need to throttle on a unit and just do everything you can into it, use both of them, and it's not too much of an overpriced a skirmishing kind of combo that comes with the truck. So it's actually a really nice package. This is a really well thought out and designed list. So let's look up his win path. So game 1, he had the Adeptus Custodes. You take Shield Captain with the Lars Turbinators. Shield Captain with Dawn Eagle Jetbike. So my boy's trying. And a US of Lars Terminators. I think Terminators are quite excellent in Custodes into Orks because of their blast grenade launches with re-rolls when you have characters in their unit. So that's really good. 2 Ares gunships. So this dude was just going out there. Okay, never mind. Then he has Inquisitor, Eisenhorn, Inquisitor, Henchman. I've actually played against these Ares gunships. They just don't have volume. So very much I'm just banking it because the army was not where they wanted to be. But that's how it is sometimes when you go to events and you're playing with people who are round 1. It just comes out like that. You should never be surprised if you get a wacky list at round 1 at an event. Then you have Sisters, Adeptus Sororus with the Hollowed Martyr Ladies. We have a Canonist, Palatine, Saint Celestine, Triumph of Saint Catherine. So that's like it gives a bunch of different aura buffs around that little lady. It's not a little lady, it's a group of ladies. But we have Battle Sisters, 2 units of those, 2 Immolators, which I think are quite better than their version of just the straight up tanks, right? These aren't the ones. Yeah, okay. I think actually are those? Never mind. So we have two units of Rhinos, followed by 2 units of Arcoflagellants with 3 Castigators. There they are. A Crusader squad, three Seraphim units, and 1 Seraphim unit. Okay, there we go. So he brought all the small baby MSU units so you can run around and play the mission optimally, which is very annoying for most armies. But in Green Tide, you can take up all that space and kind of literally wash over all of these small, annoying skirmish units. Castigators are all right. You know, they're not bad. They don't have good AP into armor, so the battle wagon can literally just kind of ignore these girls, as disrespectful as that sounds. Because these other units like the rhinos and the emulators aren't really going to do much to a battle wagon. They could, because sisters, remember, they can choose to just automatically hit you on 6s with something like a melted gun and such. But being -1 AP and strength like 10, I think on their cannons, right, isn't so something their battle cannon isn't something to worry about. Of course, the arcoflagellants are oddly good at stopping the orcs, just because like the fact that they have their 4 up feel no pain and their 2 wounds of pop for a 10-man unit. But something that goes through that is a boatload of dice being thrown at them. The fact that they're actually a big unit means we get our full potential punches into them. If we do punch them, we roll into wounds, hitting on 2s. Obnoxious can actually put up the volume to one-shot these unit. Even if they don't, they greatly diminish it. So it's not a bad unit, but like army by any means, the sisters army. It's just one of those things that people just wouldn't have the tools to take over something like a Bully Boys unit reliably with their low AP from and the fact that he had I popped out of that. And the fact that he was running, just click the same boys list. There we go. The fact that he had Zod and the commando unit to put immediate pressure on the sister army meant he could hold them back in place, and any of these units he touches other than the tanks he can kill with like something like Zod, because Zod has a power claw and +1 to wound built into that. So he can actually punch up in there and actually could bait out these arcoflagellants, so then he could put volume of punches from the knobs. Even the flash gets put good volume into them with their damage too. So as a whole, this is what it looked like a fun game to play, but I would give the edge to Bully Boys in this. They do lack some AP in that matchup, and the Mega Knobs are going to just run game and kind of just walk into those tanks if they get a chance, which is what I'm assuming kind of happened. So shout out to Chris Taylor. That was a good one. Game 3, he had the Thunderwolf Camry with Thunderwolves. Ooh, let's see how this is going to look. Talking about it, we have Logan Grimnar and Stormrider. Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf. He had 3 of those. And a Wolf Lord, so just 1. He played the tax. Oh, he played the Gladiator Lancer tax. Okay, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think that's the optimal way to play that, especially just 1. Infiltrators, Scout. 1, 2, 3 bricks of Thunderwolf Cav, 1 Vindicator, 3 units of 5 Wolfen, and a Clades Assassin. Okay, so he probably just paid for the Gladiator Lancer because he could only get 1 Vindicator, or he only owned 1 Vindicator. So okay, it's not terrible by any means. It's a pretty well-rounded list here is all I'll say. He has the Wolfen to actually draw punches, but it's 5-man units. Those are more reliably actually getting punched out once they initiate against a Orc Boy unit. Whether that be Mega Knobs, if they run into a Mega Knob unit, they kill them. The Mega Knobs pretty much bounces them, especially on the wall. With the 5-man units of Knobs versus Wolfen, they can actually punch out the Knobs. But that's where not having something like Flash gets to jump out of the SWAT team and pump 2 damage shots, wounding them on 3s with auto wounding on lethal wounds on them and sustain. They can chip down those Wolfen units if they ever peek their head. So they actually have to respect and stage properly, which is something they're not used to. And Logan Grimnar is pretty big base when he's on Stormrider. So these units very much can hit you, but it's one of those things where they wouldn't be able to delay, and you have to hope that this is one of those things where taking the initiative from this army really hurts it. And Bully Boys being able to kind of double butt into that and have a chance to bounce you with Mega Knobs and then counter punch and beat them up is something that the Wolves don't really want to deal with. So it is a hard game. I would not say it's like an easy immediately matchup, but Chris Taylor played it correctly, putting up 80 points, though. It was his lowest win point percentile. Having Zagrat in that matchup to be able to run up and just stuff them in their deployment zone, possibly in the commandos, right? You're like, well, if you put your scouts here, I can also chew them up. I can touch them and just stand right in front of your Thunderwolves with that, so I could charge them and then string along and still bounce you out of your objective and keep you back turn 1. Take the spots for staging, make my Mega Knobs take the objectives. You have to punch them off or they get free primary and deny you primary. Then when I survive that, I counter punch you with my knobs and SWAT teams. So that matchup would be very much we actually control the pace with the double wall. So we get to take the initiative from those Thunderwolves, and we have the infiltrating / scouting from that. So it's very much working. And so what that would be, that's a talked about tech piece combo of using Zagra and Commandos to stop something like what would be considered one of our hard matchups in the Thunderwolf Cavalry. So it was very nice to see that it ended up being a actual realistic, practical combo that is being spoken around in our Discord and everything like that. Very much good, and it really did counter something that would be considered a hard matchup in the meta as a whole for most people. Just because Thunderwolves can actually hit hard and really beat you up as an orc. So then he went into round 4. He said Chaos Space Marines. This is kind of outdated from where we're at because they got the new books and CSM and everything. So it was just some cannons and some Legionnaire Warps, Talons, stuff like that. He didn't have anything to really threaten the Bully Boys reliably. Then in his last matchup, he went into Death Guard. Death Guard is something that we do not want to see as orc players if they play their rules correctly. So we have a Biologist Purifier, 3 of them, 3 Foul Blight Spawns, 1, 2, 3 Bricks of Plague Marine. So you already know what's going on there. He has 1, 2, 3 Rhinos, a Cultist unit, 2 Predator Destructors, floated Bloat Drones, 2 Plague Burst Crawlers, and 2 units of Nurglings. Ooh, so he does actually have all the tools. I would say these autocannons don't have the greatest AP, but Death Guard have ways to improve AP. And I think these autocannons give additional AP when they're shooting infantry. So I will say the indirect fire too. If the Death Guard player is smart, he will prioritize all the scoring units. It is nice that he has 4 trucks so he can actually hide, but having Zagra and Commandos, that would be a thing where you're like, well, I could stop all of your Rhinos from getting where they want to be and jumping out and hitting you with the auto flamers that are anti-infantry. These are units that you have to hope that you do survive when this Plague Marine unit comes out with your Commandos on the 4 of Feel No Pain. You actually do very much have a chance between your armor saves. And of course, even reducing AP, being Bully Boys with that, you can actually survive on your armor saves for that. Just keep in mind that they can double stacked -2 to hit essentially. So how that's done is their contagion aura, they can choose to deny your weapon skill or ballistic skill by 1 to your actual skill, meaning on the data sheet in your head would change. So orcs would go from hitting on 4s with their power claws to 5s with their power claws. Then they would also put a Nurgling unit by you, which is an aura of -1 to hit. So it's essentially -2 to hit. Therefore, your orc power claws could end up hitting on 6s in this matchup. Of course, you do have the war bosses in there to go back to +1, so you'll be hitting on 5s. You just really have to pay attention to having the Bully Boys getting reroll the hits and hope you can do the damage there. This was a skill-based kind of game for you to be able to overcome as a orc player because they have all of the tools to kill you with the indirect to take out your scoring stuff like Commandos. They can shoot your home field grot unit that's trying to farm UCP if they're being smart with their target priority as a Death Guard player. And they have the flamers and special weapons that they could put into you and really punch out some of your elite units. But in response, having something like flash kits that you can be like, oops, you place those Nurglings where I can shoot them, pick up those Nurglings. Heck yeah, nah, I don't have -2 to hit. That could be a factor. Being in trucks so you can actually counter stage them while Zodding Mandos take the board is pretty good too. So I could see him have killing just enough, but outscoring and having more board control than the Death Guard player. That's the only way you're really going to see that be playing out and going, and hoping that the Death Guard player makes a few mistakes with his target priorities. So shout out to Chris Taylor, whoa, for running the Bully Boys, but he ran them with flavor and a twist. He took the theory to the bank. He said, where you guys are talking about running 2 walls, how about we have a primary wall with the Zagra and the Commandos for complete board control, and I can delay you hard, and then I come in with the other one. So for the Bully Boys. So that's really impressive to see. I really appreciate that. That's why I decided to cover it, even though it was a smaller event. And something else I appreciate is Wicked Joe giving 10 walk tactics gifted membership. Whoa! So be sure you collect that, boys. So you could become a nice little squiggy. If any of you guys are gray, that's not okay. No, I'm just kidding. But you can stop being a homie and join the Great WAAAGH. So let's look up. Thank you very much, Wicked Joe, for that. Let me get rid of some of these lists. So thank you, Joe. Very generous of you. I appreciate it, buddy. Great job also at the GT you went to. Get them models done, boy. So we have Michael Mann coming in at another GT, but this was a 141 player event. This game was played on War Games Live. So that's something you guys could go back and watch. He did have this final matchup was against Brad Chester, and that was on War Games Live. Very close game. There was some little contentious points about him rolling a 4. He was put fighting on death, and he rolled a 4, and it was a 5 to needed because it was outside of a wall. So keep that in mind. But both players didn't catch it. That's just part of the game. Still enjoy it for what it is. Nobody's mad. So we're still going to take a look at it. We'll peek at Brad Chester's list too. We just won't get into his actual matchups, just because you can cover that on his YouTube channel on Death and Glory, and because we have another War Horde list we're going to show you. But in this matchup with Michael Mann, he ran a Bully Boys list, but this was a bit of it was a different archetype from the one we previously showed with the Commandos and Zagrat. So this one has a Beast Boss, and he calls this list No Gas plus Wagon. So he has a Beast Boss on foot with Ed Stompa. With that enhancement, it is a re-rolling wound rolls of 1, and if the unit's already below half strength, then it's full re-rolls to wound. That's really nice when you have that wounds. Very nice. I love that. So we have Snickrot, because Snickrot's awesome. 3 units of War Bosses. 3 units of War Bosses of Mega Armor, and then 1 Teleporter. I think that's perfectly fine too, just that combo. I love it. So Beast Snagger Boy, sorry. 3 trucks, 1 Battle Wagon, 2 units of Grots, 3 units of Mega Knobs, 1 being a max unit. All of these units have twin kill saws. And then he has 3 units of Knobs and 5-man units. Bam. Barely any fat on this list. He did have the Battle Wagon, though. So he was able to kind of mix up which units he wanted and what to come out and really do some damage. So it's very interesting. As you can see, we're going over Battle Wagons were quite popular, as they should be, as they're at a good point cost, and they're very good in durability. So with this list, let's keep in mind he actually did have the devastating wound. So let's see his matchups, what might have mattered. We have, into his first matchup, this Chaos Space Marine. So we'll just go through it quick because this has not changed. He has his Demon Prince, Chaos Warpsmiths, Chaos Lords, Havocs, Hellbrutes, Forge Fiends. So this would be something that you might have to run into now in the new codex, since they have that Demon Engines detachment. Bully Boys would do all right into that as long as you bring all Mega, like twin kill saws, and really avoid their really high offensive output early. That way you can kind of tank more turns tanking it. And this might be a matchup where Big Mac might become an interesting tech piece in the future into that matchup, but that's for the future. Then he put up 100 points in that game. In his second matchup, he went against Chaos Knights. This is probably Baby Knight spam. So he has War Dog Stalker. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Brigands. 1, 2, 3, 4 Carnivores. 2 Nurglings, Plague Bearers, and then Sloppy Bile Piper for those Plague Bearers. Yeah, I mean, Brigands have no AP on their Gatling guns. This is a good amount of dogs, but really it's like all you need is the Meltas to whiff once, and you're getting run over by the Orks. Carnivores are fine for their point cost, but having 4 units just isn't enough to halt the Bully Boys running you over. So that was just all meat. Put up 100 on that too. He was like, yeah, I'm just going to run you down, buddy. Especially because I have trucks and battle wagons and such. Then he went to Imperial Knights. Ooh, this is a good one. Canis Rex. Castell's Knight. He had a Revert Knight aura. You had 3 Helvrins with the autocannons, 1, 2, 3 Warglaves, a Caladius Assassin, a Calexis Assassin, and a Voidman at Arms. So he's trying to play the mission with those units. It's an odd point cost he's probably left over with, since he's running 2 of the big knights. But that's kind of common for Imperial Knights to run 2 of those big ones. Autocannons, they're not going to find too much of a home. They could actually bounce surprisingly from trucks. Could be actually get saves against them. So there's that. We can tank the damage on everything but our actual knob boy units, but they can run out and get into these fights. So I really liked the fact that he had to play into several knight lists that could just do big damage, but just don't. So he just ran them over. So he does have to respect Canis Rex for his amazing profile and his data sheets for his killing potential. He can run through and punch out Mega Knobs. So he would have to be careful of that. But that's where something a nice Beast Boss on foot might become a factor there and really put some initial wounds on somebody, or help finish something off, better yet, with Ed Stompa. So very nice to see that he ended up overcoming the Imperial Knights. That's an intimidating matchup, because those are a bunch of multi-damage units that can kill you. And speaking of a intimidating matchup, he went into Death Guard as his 4th game. So he has 1, 2 Purifiers, 3 Blight Spawns, Malignant Plaguecaster, and then Typhus. So he's a bunch of fight verse here, same as the other list that we covered before. 1, 2, 3 units of Plague Marines, 3 Rhinos, Occultist, Floated Bloat Drones, 2 of them, three plague burst crawlers, excuse me, and just one nurgling squad. So thank goodness he only has one nurgling squad. It's a much less fighting of -2 to hit possibly. So you only have it on one side of the table, and that side of the table is getting ran over. Like I said, you do have to kind of hope that your Mega Knobs take this damage because they do get to fight first. They do have their flamers. They do get their two special weapons, but you could really much survive it in the Bully Boys for that reason. Also, fighting on Death might help. Just know that they can reduce damage by 1. So there's ways to have to deal with this when you're going into. And Typhus is actually pretty good for his mortal wounds. And it looks like he was solo opted up here, I think. I didn't see any units that you would stick him to, so you have to consider someone put him in deep strike and then drop solo Typhus wherever they want him on the table. So that's pretty dope. Very much a respectable list. Bully Boys can handle it. Dread Mob can handle it. But it's still a difficult matchup nonetheless. I'm sure Michael Mann was just a great player too, as we've seen in his War Games live games. His 5th matchup was against Black Templars, Gladius Task Force. We have Champion Grimaldus, High Marshal Hellbrick, Lieutenant with combi weapon. 2 units of big Crusader bricks, 2 drop pods, 2 Gladiator Lancers, Hellblaster Squad with the Plasma Incinerators. Only one Sword Brother in unit. So GW finally made these boys cost too much, huh? 2 Scout Squads. So he was really hoping on these Primaris Crusader squads and Marshal Hellbrick to just chop through stuff. So he's trying to go to church with you. That's what he says. He's trying to go to town and fight you toe to toe. The fact that we have fight on death would actually hurt. They do too. But we're the ones who's getting kind of good trades out of that and more reliable kills, and we can actually survive the initial encounter sometimes too. So it is a good matchup for us in this case. We're just like, oh, we have a bunch of 2 damage attacks, and you have a bunch of 2 damage bodies with 3 up armor save. Very much enjoying that. So Michael Mann most likely had a good proper scrap with Jay Colward. I'm sure he had a great time. And then we'll take a look at Brad Chester's list, just because he was another great performing Orc list. And he had gas. So we have ATC gas. His list has changed since this, but we'll talk about that after. It's Boss Snickrock, Gaz Gotraka, 2 war bosses, War Boss Omega armor, follow me lads, because he is walking War Horde, which is the index attachment. 3 trucks, 1 brick of flash gits, 2 units of grots, 2 units of mega knobs with power claws, knobs, 2 bricks of knobs, a Squig Hog Boy unit, and 2 Storm Boy units. So he did drop the Squig Hog Boys and decided to bring more stuff. Other than that, he could talk about it on his matchup. But this was actually a list that went toe to toe with the Bully Boys, the list we just went over with Michael Mann, and he had a good time, and it was a good scrap. So go check it out on War Games Live. He did end up winning that in a very, very close matchup into a very good Orc player that was properly screening with his trucks, trying to take the initiative from him. And Gaz not being able to go down easily and putting 4 damage punches out, giving a nice lethal aura to punch out the boys. Sustain, it just helps you with the volume in that matchup. So very cool. Freaking awesome game that you can go see. Great job to Michael Mann, though, for winning, getting 2nd place and going undefeated with Bully Boys at this sort of event. He just brought all meat. That's all it was, boys. He just went there with all just fighting potential, fighting spirit. He didn't come with the fancy shenanigans like Chris did earlier, which I actually liked Chris's list a lot. Just saying they were very different, polar opposite Bully Boys lists. So in either way, you're looking at the Bully Boys and you want to run either one of those styles of, do I want to take an initial WAAAGH and then follow up with a proper WAAAGH? With the Bully Boy WAAAGH, that's very much on the table. So that's on the table, but so is just battle wagons, trucks, bosses on bosses on bosses. So yeah. And he said how he scored higher, how is he 2nd? It's because I think the matchup of the opponents that he had to face were probably higher for Kyle. Kyle probably went against what were higher points potential from the opponent's overall scores that he played. Therefore, it ended up pushing him over to the top. But good question. That's why he came in 2nd. But yeah, it's just people have different ways of scoring sometimes. Like that's the kind they do points and stuff. But still very respectable. That's why I wanted to show it, because even though he didn't get 1st, it was a very, very good showing for 2nd and arguably 1st. So this was a 64 event, but there was a lot of tickets remaining. So they did attempt to make it up to the 64 player mark, which is a respectable number. But it was only about 35 in this event for the collector's market. But I wanted to cover it because Dylan Hopkins brought back the War Horde, boys. He not only brought back the War Horde, but he brought in the Kill Rig boys. So at the end of the index, people were starting to use Kill Rigs again and respect them and put respect on their name. And it looks like our boy Dylan did the same thing. So he has Gazgo Thraka, 2 Pain Boys, 3 War Bosses, 1 with Follow Me Lads and a Weird Boy, 1 unit of Beast Snagger Boys, followed by 3 units of 20 Boys, 2 units of Gretchen, 2 units of Kill Rigs, 1 Mega Knob unit, 2 Storm Boy units. Bam. If you really want to know how this list worked, you can go to watch our how to run an Ork Boy mob video. There was actually a very similar list that had one a GT in the end of the index from Stephen Pempridge that was running 2 wagons, 2 kill rigs, and 60 boys as well. This was different, obviously, because he had gas, he had pain boys, so it was his own twist. He really adjusted it for what the War Horde's better at by having gas in there for sure now. But it was very similar style, and you can watch how people would swing 20-man units of boys. Very, very proper way to play with these 20-man units to get the most potential out of them. Having kill rigs there so you can give them lethal, possibly +1 strength, combining it with the WAAAGH strength, or even doubling down both kill rigs auras and giving +1 strength there. Having last cannon so you can help destroy stuff as the Mega Knobs go in and counterpunch enemies. Elite infantry. Gaz is a solo monster on his own, and then the Boyz getting lethal aura gives him a bunch of volume that he can take advantage of, because then you can pop Unbridled Carnage and you get lethal and sustain 5+ from Gaz and the Ork Boy mob, so it becomes a crazy potential output. I freaking love it. Very much in love with this sort of list, and I'm glad that it made an appearance, because everybody was down on the kill rigs and down on Snaggas and War Horde. Well, there's nothing to be down about. War Horde's powerful, as a lot of us expected. And after some, nerfs to Mega Knobs, it might be the most powerful, undoubtedly. So keep that in mind, War Horde. If you're playing it or practicing with it, or you were getting used to it, just keep playing it. You're in the right track. So we have his first matchup is against Grey Knights. Brotherhood Librarians with first to the fray. Brotherhood Librarian, Castellan Crow, Grandmaster Dread Knight, and then Caldor Drago. He has 1 unit of Terminators, Strike Marines, Redeemer, 1-2 Dread Knights, a brick of Purifiers, and the Vindicators. So Caldor Drago can go with the Terminators, and they do a +3 to the charge when he comes out of Deep Strike. So he can pretty much just run up and get a really reliable charge into you. And then Castellan Crow goes with the Purifiers for, I believe, +1 to hit. And I think he gives them another shot if they're within a certain range. So he really increases their volume on that. A lot of killing on this list. It definitely doesn't want to get killed, by being too aggressive. But at the same time, if it doesn't respond to Orks or really take the initiative from them, we kind of just win out on points. This would be a matchup you'd have to really hope that they whiff when they take the initial damage on you, just because Purifiers and Dreadnoughts can really mess you up, but they don't necessarily have the volume to reliably kill a bunch of Ork boys. And Gaz will challenge the mid-table for something like these Terminators or these Dreadknights when they drop, to say, well, I'm going to get stuck in with you, and you can only pull yourself out of the combat one side of the field. So it comes up to you as the Ork player to understand how their abilities work and go, well, I'm going to move towards your Terminators. If you want to move your Purifiers now, oh, you didn't move your Purifiers. Well, I have, here we go. So actually I get +2 to my charge, and I'll just stay outside of your 9-inch bubble, and I'll get +2 to it, and I'll just hope that I get this charge with the reroll. There's ways that you could possibly get around their movement shenanigans. It's up to you as Ork player to understand how those work and play them to your maximum potential, especially if you're playing something like War Horde, where you're like, ooh, these guys are really freaking annoying with their movement shenanigans, and I have 1 turn to kind of try to one-shot them. So they do somewhat have the volume, but at the same time, having Gaz on this matchup, I think makes a big difference, because his big man's unit will take all the damage from the Dread Knights, and then even if they charge in and try to kill the rest of the man's unit, Gaz in return can beat them up, hold them in place. Your boys swarm it, grab the primary, keep playing the mission, then you outpoint them. So it's not an easy matchup by any means to start the games off with, especially with War Horde, but love to see it. Love to see a bunch of boys do great to Grey Knights. Then we have Death Guard again. So we see a bunch of Death Guard lists, and all of them have fight first. So we have about 2 Biology Purifiers, 3 Blight Spawns, a Malefic Plague class caster, 1, 2, 3 units of Plague Marines, 3 Rhinos, Cultists, Predator Destructor, 2 drones, 3 crawlers. So a lot of tanks. He's really relying on the Plague Marines to really do work, and they do work. They would pick up those 20-man units of boys. But that's where having, like I said, Gaz, where you're popping Unbridled Carnage on the wall, even if they reduce your damage by 1, you're putting such great volume into them that's cutting through them that really puts them away. That's a super difficult matchup. So you can see it was his lowest scoring win here for Dylan, and the player he went against got 3rd. So there was a respectable matchup. Not sure what the mission was. I'd love to hear that. I've played that matchup before myself, and it is very, very close. It does come to you knowing when to commit into them and when to just just kind of lean back and relax a little bit because you know they're going to fight you first. Also, having 2 CP so you can counterattack is actually very useful because even though you don't get to fight first, you can fight between the 2 units that are trying to fight you, right? Because they get fight first, so they take away your charge, but you can still use the interrupt stratagem or the counterattack stratagem, so you can fight before one of those Plague Marine squads. So that makes a big deal, helpful in the matchup, especially when you have Gaz on that go turn. So fighting in death also helps you there too. And I'm not sure, did he have Nurglings? Sorry if he did. I want to see how many. He didn't have Nurgling, so you're not getting the -2 to hit. So that's a big difference too. So shout out to Dylan for overcoming that. Not an easy matchup. Then in his third game, he went into Ashley, who's an Eldar list. He had the Avatar, Death Jester, Farseer, our target way leaper, Night Spinner, 2 Shadow Specters, 3 support weapons, 2 Swooping Hawks, 2 units of Warp Spider, 3 units of Warp Spiders. If he would have combined these into like one big unit and then put the Flamers on there and got devastating, that could be an interesting way to kill some of these bricks, but none of these things are really enjoying seeing. Like, they do have the Night Spinner to at least slow one unit, so you could slow the Gaz unit in this matchup. That would be annoying, but all being all, right, even Gaz popping Unbridled Carnage for Avatar Kane for one of the different units on the list would really help in that matchup. So Eldar wouldn't really have any tools to deal with this many Orc units that feel no pains and bodies and just bodies, and even a diminished Orc unit could kind of deal with you. On top of the kill rigs possibly giving lethal or +1 strength so that the Avatar can get wounded easier. It's just, there's a bunch of different cool ways that game could be played. So, sorry. And then in his 4th matchup, very respectable win, by the way. He had his 4th matchup with Doggos, so just Chaos Knights. He had the Dwarf Stalker, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Brigands, 1, 2, 3, 4 Carnivores, Nurglings, and the Rodigus. Rodigus is something for real. He can reduce OC by 1, and he just has a dumb amount of wounds with his 4-up invuln, but he's still getting punched out by something like Orc Volume, and Gaz really helps in that too, so that's really awesome. I'm just really excited to see that War Horde was doing so good here with just using a bunch of big 20-man units of Boyz, Gaz, and some kill rigs. That's ridiculous, and if someone would have told you that happened, they wouldn't believe you. Even at an RTT level, that would be hard to believe in the current matchup and the path to victory he had into Death Guard and some hard lists that have, known to beat Orcs. He overcame those as well. So very cool. And then on his 5th matchup is Astra Militarum Scions. So it's Cadian Castellan, command squads, 3 command squads, 3 Primaris Psychers, and Ursula Creed, a bunch of Torox, Turk Primes, some Rough Riders, 3 units of those, a bunch of Bulgrins, Kazarkins, 2 units of Kazarkins, and then a bunch of Scions. Very off-meta list. It was obviously doing good since he had to play it at the end, and he got 2nd place at this event. I actually own a full Tempestus Scion army, so I actually know the rules for these combinations for the most part, with being able to put a bunch of AP on people and getting lethal and +1 to hit on the Scions. It is actually pretty good. It's just not good into Orcs because your glass cannons, and we're not really caring about these high value damage shots you're putting into us. We can take enough saves, a diminished unit runs into you and beats the crap out of you, especially with a bunch of boy units. So it was a matchup for us into that 1 odd unit ball Master Militarum list, but knowing the Astra Militarum rules, he actually does great. So shout out to Dylan Hopkins for rocking the War Horde and going undefeated for another 5-0 undefeated Orc list. So that was multiple Orc lists that went undefeated that we covered today for the 4 Orc lists that we had. So we had 1 Green Tide coming in with the Bricks Boys getting stuck in, no Gaz, but a bunch of commandos. Then we also had another commando unit, list that we covered with the Bully Boy units, with Zagra and Wartsnaga with commandos in there. So that's 2 units. 2 of the lists that went undefeated this weekend were using commandos, and 1 of them was using Zagrod. So keep that in mind. Then for the last Bully Boys list we covered, it was all me, all Mega Nubs and War Bosses, no Gaz on that list, followed by a War Horde list that had kill rigs, a nice plethora of tools and fun volume, and a bunch of Orc Boy mobs. So Orcs did a great job this weekend. We'll end up seeing where they end up in the meta, who they end up hurting, and who ends up trying to get us nerfed, right? So be excited about the Orcs. There's plenty of ways to play your Orc armies. Keep collecting them as you were. If you've been practicing with the War Horde, keep playing the War Horde, as it's really, really good. If you're moving towards Bully Boys or anything like that, check out our Discord, talk to us, get stuck in there, lads, because this is just the beginning of the rise of the Green Tide. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a hobby stream, so keep that in mind. And then next week I'll be releasing the Green Tide video. So I would delay on that because I was doing some research on that, and I just got stuck in for all this stuff that's going on. So really excited to talk to you guys about all that. Everybody should be happy on where we're at with Orks. Don't listen to the hate online. Enjoy playing with your Stompas. They're doing good at RTTs in a funny way. The Dread Mob's still trying to find its way, but still very exciting to play. So we just need someone to figure out Cult of Speed, you know, because they're just hanging on trying to figure it out right now. They don't have a good big player base. So, all right. But with that in mind, there's always one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall because we not get defense.